Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Vera Anandya Putri. I'm from Group 1, and today we will discuss about language, dialect, and varieties. And in here, I want to explain about language. Okay, in here, I will try to explain about language. What is the meaning of language? Language is many things. It can be a system of communication, a medium for thought, or vehicle for literary expression, a matter for political controversy, and a catalyst for nation building. The existence of language can be separated from human life. It can be seen from the fact that all activities related to interaction among people necessitate a language, and language is an important means of communication. And language reflects thinking. Obviously, we can't say a sentence until we have first thought of it. Often our thinking gets mixed with emotions and our reasons become loaded with desires, wishes, prejudices, and opinions. And the kind of thinking we do is our business until we try to persuade someone else to agree to our point of view. Then that thinking becomes another's business. I will explain about language and dialect. Hudson 1996, page 22 defines a variety of language as a set of linguistic items with similar distribution, a definition that allows us to say that all of the following are varieties: Canadian English, London English, the English of football commentaries, and so on. According to Hudson, this definition also allows us to treat all the language of some multilingual speaker or community as a single variety, since all the linguistic items concerned have a similar social distribution. And a variety can therefore be something greater than a single language, as well as something less even than something traditionally referred to as a dialect. Language can be at variance in lexical, grammatical, phonological, and other ways depends on different social, geographical, and other circumstances determine what elements will be needed and therefore developed, and for that reason sociolinguistics believe that such unique sets of items or patterns do exist. Most speakers can give a name to whatever it is they speak. On occasion, some of these names may appear to be strange to those who take a scientific interest in languages. But we should remember that human naming practices often have a large unscientific component to them, and census takes in India find themselves confronted with a wide array of language names when they ask people what language they speak. Names are not only ascribed by region, which is what we might expect, but sometimes also by caste, religion, village, and so on. And moreover, they can change from census to census as the political and social climate of the country change. While people do usually know what language they speak, and they may not always lay claim to be fully qualified speakers of that language, they may experience difficulty in deciding whether what they speak should be called a language proper or merely a dialect of some language. And such indecision is not surprising. Exactly, how do you decide what is a language and what is a dialect of a language? And what 28 languages, dialects, and varieties criteria can you possibly use to determine that? Whereas variety X is a language, variety Y is only a dialect of a language. What are the essential differences between a language and a dialogue. Haugen 1966 has pointed out that language and dialect are ambiguous terms. Ordinary people use these terms quite freely in speech. For them, a dialect is almost certainly no more than a local, non-prestigious, therefore powerless variety of a real language. In contrast, scholars often experience considerable difficulty in deciding whether one term should be used rather than the other in certain situations. As Huygens says, the terms represent in a simple dichotomy in a situation that is almost infinitely complex. He points out that the conclusion goes back to the ancient Greeks. The Greek language that we associate with ancient Greece was actually a group of distinct local varieties, Ionic, Doric, and Attic, descended by divergence from a common spoken source, with each variety having its own literary traditions and uses, e.g. Ionic for history, Doric for choral and lyric works, and Attic for tragedy. Later, Athenian Greek, the Koine or common language, became the norm for the spoken language as the various spoken varieties converged on the dialect of the major cultural and administrative center. Haugen points out page 923 that the Greek situation has provided the model for all later usage of the two terms with the resulting ambiguity. Language can be used to refer either to a single linguistic norm or to a group of related norms, and dialect to refer to one of the norms. The situation is further confused by the distinction the French make between a dialect and an patois. The former is a regional variety of a language that has an associated literary tradition, whereas the latter is a regional variety that lacks such a literary tradition. Therefore, a patois tends to be used pejoratively. It is regarded as something less than a dialect because of its lack of an associated literature. Even language like Britain, a Celtic language still spoken in parts of Brittany, is called patois because of its lack of a strong literary tradition and the fact that it is not some countries' language. And however, a dialect Dialect in French, like dialect in German, cannot be used in connection with the standard language, and no speaker of French considers standard French to be a dialect of French. In contrast, it is not uncommon to find reference to standard English being a dialect, admittedly a very important one of English. And Haugen points out that while speakers of English have never seriously adopted patois as a term to be used in the description of language, and they have tried to employ both language and dialect in a number of conflicting senses, and dialect is used both for local varieties of English and Yorkshire dialect and for various types of informal, lower class or rural speech, and in general usage it therefore remains quite undefined whether such dialects are part of the language or not. And in fact, the dialect is often thought of as standing outside the language. As a social norm, then, a dialect is a language that is excluded from polite society. Page 924, it is often equivalent to non-standard or even substandard when Such terms are applied to language and can connote various degrees of inferiority, with that connotation of inferiority carried over to those who speak a dialect. One such attempt, C. Bell, has listed 7 criteria that may be usable in discussing different kinds of languages. According to Bell, these criteria: standardization, vitality, historicity, autonomy, rejection, mixture, and vector norms may be used to distinguish certain languages from others, and they also make it possible to speak of some languages as being more developed in certain ways than others, and thus addressing a key issue in the language dialect distinction. Since speakers usually feel that languages are generally better than dialects in some sense. And the first, standardization, refers to the process by which a language has been codified in some way. And the second is fidelity. Fidelity refers to the existence of a living community of speakers. And the third is historicity. Historicity refers to that a particular group of people finds a sense of identity through using a particular language. It belongs to them. And therefore, autonomy. Autonomy is an interesting concept because it is really one of feeling. A language must be felt by its speakers to be different from other languages. And the fifth, rejection. Rejection refers to the fact that a particular variety may be regarded as a sub-variety rather than as an independent entity. Next, 6. Mixture refers to feelings speakers have about the purity of the variety they speak, and the last, de facto norms, refers to the feeling that many speakers have that there are both good speakers and poor speakers, and that the good speakers represent the norms of proper usage.